Meeting of the MSAD27 Board of Directors. Roll call, please.
Keith Jandro.
Here.
Shannon Leslie.
Here.
Abby Fuller.
Here.
Dave Susi.
Here.
Tanya Wazay.
Here.
Gary Sibley. Here. Sarah Ashley.
Here.
Okay, we have a couple of adjustments to the agenda. Under add new item 5, Superintendent A, School Board Service Award. And under items of business, add new business, A, Cooperative Wrestling Team approval. We have the motion to add the new agenda items.
So moved.
Moved by Tanya, seconded by Gary. Any discussion? All in favor? Agenda items added. Okay, period of public participation on items of this agenda. None. Okay. Approval of the meeting minutes for meeting number 918, October 24, 2022.
So moved.
Moved by Sarah, seconded by Ms. Fuller. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the meeting minutes? Any two abstentions?
Yeah, I wasn't here.
Because they weren't here. Very good. Motion passes. Okay. Superintendent?
I just wanted to make you all aware that we did nominate Barry Willett for the School Board Service Award from Maine School Board Association for his 14 years of dedicated service to education in Maine. MSBA has recognized him with this certificate, and we will be delivering that to him later this week. I just wanted you all to know that. And thank you, Mr. Willett, if he's watching the case complaint.
Thank you, Barry. Okay. Item 6, School Business, Valley Unified Interlocal Agreement.
So you have what I shared with you last meeting with some notation of the conversation I had with legal counsel. One thing that I just want to just highlight is, as we've been negotiating the terms of the agreement with Madawaska and 33, some of the things that this board were really focused on getting corrected have come a long way towards that goal. One of them being the governing body. You have all felt that the equal share of votes after especially after the school was no longer going to be a reality, needed to be amended so that it was more appropriate to your representation and more importantly your cost share. That has been achieved in this draft. There was also a lot of consideration for you all to make sure that there was some way to withdraw from this agreement. The past language basically made it impossible to withdraw. With this, you're that much closer to that. Being able to do that in the event, and not only you, but any other parties, if the Education Service Center is no longer working for them. So that being said, I guess the floor is open to you all to discuss the agreement.
Well, I think for those of you that weren't around, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, the rest of us really wanted to focus on governance as one of the major issues in this agreement. We felt that having an equal vote as the other partners wasn't necessarily fair or representative of our school district because of our size and the amount of people that we represent. And I think under governing body item 9, section E, that addresses our concern. We go down from the 9-member board where each school unit sends 3 reps to a Valley Unified meeting. Now we go down to a 6-member board where each school unit gets 2 representatives. And as you can see outlined in item E, Each board member from MSAD 27 would represent 25% of the vote. Aside from that,
If you remember, Mr. Chairman, I'll go even further back when the governing body was created. You actually had 2 appointed members and 1 superintendent. So when I was representing you all, and Giselle was representing Madawaska, and Lisa Bernier was representing Frenchville, we were actually board members at the formation. So we were the, and then that quickly, as soon as I became the superintendent of all 3, obviously that was a conflict of interest. So that got eliminated, and that's where we are today.
so I'm assuming all of you have had a chance to kind of go through the agreement. Dave, you brought up some concerns in the past. I'll let you go ahead and continue on. How do you want to?
At the last meeting, I suggested that the board members, the 3 designated board members from MSAD 27 should huddle before we meet with Madawaska and Princeton to talk about where we're at, what we want to do. And Keith picked up on that and said, well, let's have a full board meeting, which I think brings us here tonight. And it was a really good idea because it actually brings me around to what I'm thinking. I've been thinking about this thing for a while. Brand new to this process, brand new to the interlocal agreement. Didn't go through all that horrible stuff with the interlocal agreement the rest of the board did over the course of a couple of years. So I think I can say I brought a fresh perspective to it. You can also say that I bring a legal perspective to it. One of my first assignments as a lawyer 42 years ago was to examine the interlocal agreement that was used to create NARF, regional incinerator place, looking at the regional airport and so forth. The interlocal agreements law in Maine had just been enacted then, and so this was a brand new thing, and the agreement that they enacted was a mess. Because it was so new, people hadn't thought through all of the possible things, scenarios that could present themselves that might require action that the agreement didn't address well at all. They were having problems at that time with towns that were simply not paying their assessments. They belonged to America. So what do you do? What is the authority of the organization to do something like that? We started looking at the agreement. It's not that people weren't doing good work in thinking through these things, or not thinking through them. It's just that it was new. And so there's always a learning curve. Somebody told me that this interlocal agreement was actually based upon the interlocal agreement that eventually resulted following a state amendment of the interlocal agreement law. I guess my point is, there's still a lot of open questions when you're dealing with this kind of arrangement. But I'd like to frame the issue for the board as best I can by talking in very general terms about what's going on when the board enters into an agreement with other SADs. It's really a transfer of power. We in Maine are very fortunate to have local control on our boards. Not every state does. Some schools are controlled by the Department of Education. Some schools are controlled by other sorts of entities. In Maine, we have board control, direct board control. That can be very painful at times. We had 2 really good examples of that, I think, in the past couple of years. The masking problem was an example of local control. People basically turned out and said, this is what we believe. And it was extremely painful. I disagree with people who are anti-masking, but I have to say, the opportunity to come in and say how you feel and to exert pressure, if you will, on the board to do that is the way it's supposed to operate. So the system was operating as it should, even if you disagreed with the results. I disagreed with the results, but I have to say, local control in action, even though I don't like the results, I like the local control. I really think it's important. I think it's something special that we have in Maine. I think it's something worth preserving. Another good example of the exercise of local control was the ultimate decision to back away from the Frenchman school. That was an exercise of raw local authority. Normally, a school board does not exercise its authority, it delegates it to the administrative staff, to the superintendent and the other staff. So they're, in effect, the people who run the school boards. And the school boards typically don't, we make policy, but, you know, let's face it, how much do we all pay attention to policy, right? You really only pick it up when there's problems with it. Not that it isn't important, but the day-to-day operations, most of the serious decisions that go on in this process are done by administrators. So they effectively have control until the board steps in and says, hey, wait a minute, this is important to our community. We're asserting ourselves. I think that's very important, and I think that's very valuable. When you enter into an interlocal agreement, you give up something to another entity. An entity that's made up of this board, in this case of Frenchville and Madawaska. That's pretty important, I think, because although there's a lot to be gained from the interlocal agreement, you have to be mindful of the fact that you're giving up local control. Where does it go? Well, it goes to those boards. The Valley Board. Practically speaking, it goes to the administrators of that organization, because running a school is a very complicated thing. It requires knowledge of tons of regulations and statutes. It requires knowledge of human resources and budgeting and market, all kinds of stuff. So it's a really complicated thing. We're not trained in that stuff. We're elected to serve in this position. We rely on professional staff to do that. And so the professional staff has tremendous control over what happens day to day, right? And that's the way I think it has to be. But I think it also has to be that we retain the option of stepping in and saying, hey, wait a minute, we want to go to this direction. Now, long explanation. What does that got to do with this? Well, when we sign this agreement, we're giving up a piece of our local control. And I have to say, frankly, potentially a very significant piece, depending on the issue that the group is taking up. So, as we look at redoing this agreement, I think it's very important for us to be thinking about how is it that each individual school board, I'm not talking just about Fort Kent, everything I'm thinking about applies with equal force to Madawaska and Frenchville, our partners in the area. And I'm sure they have all the same concerns. So the important question in my mind is, how do we bind ourselves to give up our local control and instead let this other organization decide? What's that mechanism? Well, right now it's a 7 out of 9 vote. I have to tell you, when you're thinking about this, that's nuts. For 2 reasons. First, because it's possible that 1 out of 3 representatives in one of those districts would control the outcome in defiance of what the board wants. Now, we talked last meeting a little bit, that actually happened here, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. In other words, there was 1 Fort Kent representative that said yay, and the other 2 said nay. And that yay of the 1 controlled the outcome for the whole town. What's the issue there? 2. As I said, there's 2 issues. The first is, if a board is going to take action, shouldn't the action be taken by the elected representatives on the board? I think the answer is yes, obviously. Especially if it's important, right? So why is it that we would allow the local control of this school board to be determined by as few as 1 representative of 3 on the board, who's not elected as a member of the school board, but not as a member of Valley United? They're not elected by the citizenry of Valley. And they may not have the backing of the board, but by that 1 person uniting with the other 6, you drag the whole school district into something that it may not want. That's nuts. I suspect that if it were challenged in court, it would not stand up. But more fundamentally, lawsuits aside, is that the way we want to operate? Is that the way we want to barter with our local control? And so as I was thinking about these numbers, 7 out of 9, 5 out of 6, whatever, what I suggested at the meeting of Valley United was, well, we should make it by consensus. I didn't realize it, but consensus is a really bad word to use around here. There's been a lot of discussion about this. And people understand consensus in a way that I could never imagine, but it's expanded my mind a little bit to learn about that. Let's not even talk about consensus. I think it should be unanimous. And specifically, I think it should be each board deciding on any significant matter having to do with United, what it wants to do. I don't think you can entrust that board's responsibility to 3 members who might split. They can go to the meeting and say, we're here on behalf of the board, but they're not making the decision, the board is. So it seems to me for this argument, for this agreement to operate the way it should operate, each board should come to the table through their representatives and say, yes. And if all 3 boards say yes, done. And if one of the boards says no, no, it's not done. What's the consequence of a no? Practically nothing. Say that Fort Kent and Frenchville want to do something and Madawaska doesn't want to. Valley United would not do it because Madawaska would say no. But Fort Kent and Madawaska can go ahead and do it. Fort Kent and Frenchville could go ahead and do it on their own. Set up another one of these agreements. They're designed that. The statute specifically thinks that's what you can do. You can belong to several of these things. The whole purpose behind this is to create a vehicle for folks to get together and save money. You can do that in any variety of ways. So, as I look at this and I think, okay, what's at stake here is local control. We should be, as a board, very jealous about giving that up. We owe it to our constituents, we owe it as responsible members of MSAD27. So we should not barter away or give away that control. Like this agreement gives away that control to potentially 1 out of 3 dissenting members that we appoint to the commission, that the chairman appoints, not even the board, to this group, Valley United. For the life of me, I can't understand why you would do that. It's a source of huge problems. And we just came through a huge problem, partly because of that very thing. So my proposal would be, if you're talking about board business, typical things that the Valley United Board is working on, and we each have, under this proposal, 2 representatives to the board, majority rules. And that's what this document says. But if it's something significant, we're going to start a new venture together, we're going to make a major commitment in some way, this requires 7 out of 9. And I guess I would come back and suggest, well, what it really should require is the affirmative vote of each board, as expressed and represented by the appointed members of that board working in the committee, so that those committee members aren't making the decision, it's the board making the decision. And if one of the boards says no, it's no, because that's what it should be. See, the consequences of no, as things stand today, are not serious. If they want to use X program and we want to use Y program, well, you use X, we'll use Y. No big deal. Put it on our shoulders. On the other hand, if the issue is, are we going to build a central school in Frenchville or Madawaska or Fort Kent? That's something the board should decide. And we should not put ourselves in a position where anything less than the full board, closed with authority to make these decisions, makes that clear. So effectively what that would do in this agreement is it would say that in those matters where the current document says 5-6, we would simply say affirmative vote of each board. Logistically, in terms of timing and so forth, it creates a delay because you couldn't take action quickly. But quite frankly, you shouldn't be taking action quickly. It's significant, right? It should be time for the issue to percolate, people to discuss it, consider, things that you might not otherwise think of at the spur of the moment, and then take action. So it's not something that would ever prevent the board from going in one direction or another in the space of, say, 3 months. So that was my first thought about this, and it's been evolving And that's what I told the board, the BU board, when we had our meeting this summer. But as I continue to think about this, it's the way I think we should do it.
Well, I tend to agree with you. If we're gonna send 2 reps, I think those 2 reps ought to be on board with what our full board intends, especially important decisions, but really all decisions. The 2 of us, whoever that may be, on the new Valley Unified Board, they're gonna be fully representing our board. So they need to be, you can't have one guy voting in a different direction than the other, which doesn't make any sense. Now, as far as all 3 school units agreeing, I really don't see much in our future that's gonna cause us to disagree. I think we've kind of removed the most contentious part of the previous discussions from this new ILA. If you brought it up, the school language, that's no longer in there. I don't know of anything else.
I'm looking at the historical votes, and the only time that it was not all in favor or all in favor with abstentions, it was directly related to site selection or the selection of the engineering firm. Those are the only votes that were not unanimous.
I think it could be dangerous to go into any agreement saying, now that we've settled that piece, there's no way we're going to disagree on another one. So I mean,
True.
I hope you're right,
Yep.
but I think that we might want to go and enter into this assuming that something else may come up in the future that divides us again.
And at that time, we would be right back to square one, having a dedicated meeting for this very issue. And allowing our representatives to know what our full board intends for them to, intends on, how we want to represent them at the Valley Unified meeting.
Is there
Generally
anything that
speaking,
requires them to do that though?
I don't think
Like
there's
if this
anything
board
right here
says,
that
okay,
says-
this is what we're gonna all say yay, and then Gary and I go to the meeting and we're representing and he says yay, and I'm like, nah, I don't like that. Is there anything that keeps me from?
There's nothing to stop that going. And there's nothing in the new language that stops it either.
People hate lawyers because when you go to see one, they'll tell you all the bad things that can happen. Oh, geez, so, like, well, can't we just do this? Why do we have to think about that? And such a pessimist, you know? But I have to tell you, that's what these agreements are for. If everything's going smoothly, you never hit the guardrails, right? You don't even need guardrails. But things don't go smoothly. Things go off the track, and that's why you have guardrails.
But
This is a guardrail.
But to Shannon's point also, let's say Gary and I go to a Valley Unified meeting, we vote complete opposite of what our full board, you vote one way, I vote another. I have to come back and answer to the full board and the people I represent in my community if I misrepresented them.
Yeah, but you're already
There are
here for,
repercussions.
what, 2 years? How long do we serve?
3 years.
I mean, there's not really a major repercussion necessarily, right? I mean, you still get to do that, and it could send us down a road or keep us from going down a road that everybody here agreed on.
And I don't think that changes if we send two people, 3 people,
Then
one person.
then all of us, and it's probably-
You know, you could still have that one person that just decides to go off on their own, but that person would do such a thing, they would come back and they would no longer be representing MSAD27 on that board going forward.
So to throw another, I don't know.
That's what
Well, let me make a motion if that's appropriate. Keith, you think that's appropriate?
go for it.
Well, I just say I move that we modify the agreement, and I'll prepare a draft, so that in those areas where a 5/6 vote of the members from the 3 school districts are required, you would instead require the approval of each board. So in those matters, in other words, that are that important, and they're laid out there for the most part, the board would have to take action. It wouldn't be by vote of the appointed members representing would be the actual board meeting. For Madawaska, for French Oak, and for Kent. And that the affirmative vote of all three boards would be necessary to take that action. So that's my motion.
We have a second to Dave's motion. Would you get a second, then we'll enter into further discussion regarding his motion.
Can you read it back? Sorry, that was a lot.
It won't come out the same way.
It was a lot.
So,
Let me make sure that I heard it correct, and
Sure.
that way we'll be able.
Thank
So
you.
motion to modify the agreement so that the areas where a 5-6 vote from members of the 3 districts, we would instead require the approval of each board. Each board would have to take action, not the members of the board of the BUESC. Affirmative vote from all 3 boards would be required.
right, and we should say, because the existing agreement has not been modified to 5-6, but it's still 7/9, right? We should say it's substituting for what is now on the agreement 7/9. Our draft changes went to 5-6, but really what I'm proposing is something different as we go through this process.
And this would be a proposed draft.
Right, in other words, when we go to talk to BU, we'd say, well, we had a board meeting, this is what we talked about, would you consider this? Because obviously it has to be negotiated.
I don't mind drafting. You don't have to.
Well, we can work on it together.
I can search up keywords and then just replace real fast.
Very good. Do we have a second to Dave's motion? If we get a second to Dave's motion, we enter discussion and vote on this. And then we go to the Valley Unified Board meeting, the representatives, and present this to our partners. And then they can take it back to their local boards and discuss it further, so.
I'll make a motion.
Very good. Tanya seconded Dave's motion. Now we can get it back into discussion about Dave's motion.
So there's obviously real reluctance on the part of the board members to go in that direction. I'm curious as to why.
For me, it's not necessarily reluctance. I guess, so if we look at under 9P, so it's saying that we each get like these portions of our cost sharing compared to the 5/6 vote.
It would actually eliminate that
Okay.
because your cost share wouldn't matter.
Right.
It's got to be unanimous.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I just wasn't sure because we kept referring to the 5/6.
It simplifies that part. It simplifies the whole deal, actually. Just requires, you guys are all going to agree, and you can't be forced into anything.
For those votes requiring supermajority. Like, to approve minutes, it doesn't matter, it's just.
Right. For the routine work of the board, a simple majority is sufficient.
And that would have been my only concern, is that we don't want to get into batting things back and forth for just general business items on the agenda.
And for the most part, just sort of, with the only thing that we would regularly encounter that requires a supermajority vote on a regular basis, and I know other things can come up, would be approval of the budget.
I think that's,
Other examples of what could, so I know right now we share the time clock services, is that like, just trying to put it into perspective a little bit better.
I think if they wanted to add other services, right, that would be a supermajority, or if we wanted to,
I can name them all.
Dissolving the organization.
adding members.
We should talk about that. That's another issue I'd like to talk about.
Electing your executive director requires a 7/9 vote. Altering the administrative arrangements requires a 7/9 vote. Annual operating budget, 7/9 vote. Adjusting the cost share formula requires a 7/9 vote. Dissolution requires a 7/9 vote. Transfer language says requires a 7/9 vote. Amendment of the agreement requires a 7/9 vote. And that's pretty much it.
It's foundational stuff.
But I think we would also include like the new things that are coming out, which withdrawal would be a little bit less different because it's approving of the withdrawing members, so that, but yeah, that's the majority.
Gary, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think it makes sense, you're just thinking about all of the different scenarios and different situations that could arise.
It's been a work in progress.
Yeah.
Tweaked it over the years and it's getting better every time. And I don't see an issue with Dave's proposal. And anybody else would like to speak up or discuss this further? As far as Dave's motion?
My only concern would be, what do we do in the event that one SAU wants to hold the budget hostage because something's happening in their community that's giving them pause? How do we move forward when one SAU does not want to approve their share of the budget that is part of this agreement? Because we do have a time-bound budget that needs to be approved by a certain date so that we can add it to our regular budgets. How do we, what happens when group will not approve?
And basically going back to the 33 and third vote for everything.
It's actually kind of 100% vote for everything.
Well, now it's going back to like before when we talked about Frenchville having 33% of the vote when they only have 17% of the students. Well, now they're back to basically 33% of the vote.
I think what it does practically speaking, though, is if you don't, to address your concern, if an SAD says, we don't agree with you other two about the budget, you're effectively at an impasse. And at that point, I think under this agreement, you can assess that SAD for their share anyway. Because that's basically what you're doing when you enter agreement, for commitments already made. But for going forward, I don't think you have a value united. I think what you have is a value divided. You would have to create a new organization. You could just take this and change the names on it and it would work. But it brings a halt to it unless everybody's on board on big issues.
Well, this says that if it's not approved, you effectively use the previous year's budget, at least to it doesn't halt. Changes can't happen, but I mean, the other two could always use the proposed new numbers in their budget to move forward while that kind of resolves, and then, I mean, right, because budgets are never going down, so if you use the new proposed one and it ends up using last year's and it's less, then.
Similar to what happens if a budget is voted down.
Right.
Go back to last year's budget.
We've actually never realized pay raises in the state. In the years I've worked for them, but we went with the same budget from before and we didn't have a pay raise. I don't know. I'm not completely sold on it, Dave. I think some parts of it are good, but I think there's places that it's really dangerous.
I think there are parts of it that could be difficult. For instance, if Sharon was here, she'd tell us, yeah, but you guys, if you have one guy holding out, you could mess up this program that we worked on for all years, right? We've invested all this time and effort to create these computer programs and sharing, and if the thing falls apart, that's a huge effort down the toilet for the one meeting. And we really want to avoid that. And I guess my response to that is, yeah, we really do want to avoid it. And that's why I think it's very unlikely that the board would stonewall. Let's face it, I mean, if you have an advantageous situation that's working for you, why would you throw a monkey wrench? On the other hand, if you are throwing a monkey wrench, there's got to be a significant problem. You wouldn't be doing it for leverage. You wouldn't be doing it saying, this stuff usually comes up in the context of one party trying to get leverage on the other, right? If you don't give me this, I'm not going to give you that. But you eliminate that dynamic completely when you say, hey, we're all in it together or we're not. And we're all, you got to take your own. There's no room for leverage. So if it works for you, you go with it. If it doesn't work for you, you might go with it anyway, simply because it's too much trouble to do otherwise. If it really doesn't work for you, well then you know you should be able to get out. That's what local control is all about. So it's changing the dynamic. It's changing what the way that we think about the relationship. Instead of being coercive, where you get into this and you can't get out except with great effort. It's cooperative. Mind you, there's no big stick over you better cooperate. That's not cooperation, that's fear. It requires people to act in good faith. It requires people to consider their own advantage, and if it's advantageous for everyone, go forward. I think Toby had given an example at an earlier meeting, and this was before my time, when you're trying to get a cat to get into a box. I'm going to repeat it. It's Toby's example, but he repeated it to me, and I thought it was pretty good. You put the box out in the middle of the room, and then you go chase the cat to put it in the box. You think the cat's going to willingly go in that box? No way. You're going to get scratched up. It's going to be a big, lot of trouble. It's going to be an unpleasant experience, and the cat's not going to stay in the box. On the other hand, if you just sit down, put the box in the middle of the room, and invite the cat, the cat's going to get the box. The cat's going to do it because the cat's something. And that's the way we should be looking at it. We get into these sharing arrangements because it's good for all of us. And we're going to keep it good for all of us. And if it's not good for all of us, well, we get out. It's not that big a deal, actually, but it works for everybody all the time.
So what I understand what Dave is saying is, whatever this board decides in a meeting needs to happen at the Valley Unified level. So your reps are leaving this meeting with a full understanding of what the board feels is best about budget approval or X, Y, and Z, and then you are going to that meeting and confirming what this board wants. Essentially what I understand.
And I mean, the difference between a 5-6 vote and a 6-6 vote is boards can't be split. I mean, that's only in everybody's best interest. I can't imagine the other boards would go into a vote, splitting their vote for some, I mean, that they're either both going to vote no, or they're both going to vote yes. I mean, so it's kind of weird to try to think about the difference between a 5-6 and a 6-6.
Is there a way that we can just say, like, why does it have, I mean, who cares if it's 3 people or 2 people or 1 person? That, what I think I hear some people saying anyway, is that part of the issue is we have more, we put more money in, and so we'd like to hold a little more of the cards. Which seems to make sense a little bit to me too. So can we leave the percentages, but somehow identify either within our own board or through Valley U that whatever this board says is what the representative is going to vote? And then leave it that Madawaska's got 34% and Wisdom's got 16 and we've got 50? I mean, because then a school board couldn't hold up on their own. Even we wouldn't be able to hold up. I mean, I guess at that point it's 50-50, but, you know, it, but it doesn't, I don't know if that solves it or not, but I mean, it seems to take care of the budget issue, like, or any issue where someone's holding us hostage, one board holds us hostage, because, but also solves the ultimate problem. The piece that I really agree with is whatever our representatives vote should actually represent our board.
See, this could happen. I'm on the committee, Jerry, Keith, to negotiate this with the BU. And you could all say today, Dave, thanks, but we don't like your idea. So you want it to be 5-6. Legally, and the way things are set up, appropriate, I could go to the board meeting and argue, no, guys, I know my school board said they didn't like this, but let me try to persuade you. And I could do everything I could, and they agreed. The vote would be that you would all get dragged into it, despite this discussion where you said, Dave, no, we're not doing it.
Right, so what's that solution?
Well,
I mean, can we dictate that this board makes a decision and our representative, that's the only decision they get to make, without saying that all 3 boards have to agree before we move forward?
I don't think there's a way to have both. In other words, you might have ways of voting for routine things, approving the minutes and so forth, maybe or maybe not. But there isn't a way to both tie your hands and let you free. You can't retain local control and yet give the control to the other organization. You can't have it both ways.
Right, but
I think this is.
well, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems to me that what you're saying is the person, whoever represents this board, has their free choice at this. So what's to keep them from voting against what we wanted anyway?
Exactly.
Right, so,
You can't let them do that, right?
right, right, but you're saying that they can regardless. So I'm saying, is there a way to tie their hands before they leave here?
Yeah. If we say, when you go as a representative of this board, you don't have any conflict.
Right,
It's the board that makes the decision.
right,
Now, you show up at the meeting and say, our board had a meeting, this is what we said.
yes.
Well, there's an easy solution to this. We go back to the policy committee, we create a policy that states that the Valley Unified reps of SAD 27 are to go to the Valley Unified meeting and vote accordingly based on how the SAD 27 board wishes that they vote on these issues that require a unanimous decision at the Valley Unified board.
But how is that different than like both practically speak?
Because we
Oh,
are
because
proposing,
we can
Dave,
still
we're
keep our-
eliminating our weighted vote. This has been an issue with this board forever on the weighted vote. So if we go your way, we give up our weighted vote.
But what the
If
way
we just simply change, like Keith just said, and I was gonna say, but we change our governance, our bylaws, our policy, whatever it takes to do it, that whoever represents SAD 27 on the Valley Unified Board will go and vote as directed by this board. Rather than changing this, if we change this, we lose our weighted vote.
you do. But the whole, you're right, you do lose.
And effectively, we have the same thing that you're saying, we've got the same protection, but we're doing it on the board level, the SAD 27 board level,
Right.
rather than unified.
And Madawaska can choose to do it or not.
Well, I
They can
know.
vote separate or they can vote together
Right.
and,
So what that really does is it allows us to strong arm them, but they can't strong arm us. In other words, we're in a position where we're always going to get what we want. We have a way to go, and the board is going to take an action, and it's always going to get its way. Yeah, okay. But I don't think that's fair to Madawaska or French.
well, that's not true either.
But don't
because
forget, the
it's-
weighted vote's 50%.
And the weighted vote changes based on
Right.
every year or
Yeah,
every
it's
other year.
actually
It changes, so.
Rounded up to 51, which is probably something else we should discuss today, all right? Right now, we have a weighted vote that controls. If you say you're going to go on your, well, I don't know, that's Lucy. What's our cost sharing formula this year?
It was 50%.
It was 50.7 last time. So, you know, and a fraction makes a big difference. It makes a difference between controlling the outcome and not, right? With a weighted vote, where 50.7 constant, you round up to 51, Fort Kent has control, right? It's good for Fort Kent this year. Who knows what it will be next year? I'm not really enthusiastic about that form of agreement. It's not a cooperative agreement, it's coercive.
Well, the It's not, I'm not looking at it from a strong arm point, I'm looking at it from an equity point and fairness point that we've talked about for how many years now? And one of the biggest mistakes we made in forming Valley Unified and the ILA was that we gave up our weighted vote.
But you haven't given up, you've got something better instead, it's effectively a veto. So that a weighted vote cannot be employed against you if the weight is next year in Madawaska's favor. You've got a veto, it's better than a weighted vote.
But Dave, say we move to, right now it's 50%. Say a few years down the road, things shift a lot, and we're at 65%.
Right.
And not to pick on Frenchville, but they're the smallest one. They're down at 12%. They can shut the whole thing down. Even though Madawaska and 27 want something, with only 12% of the enrollment, they can stop everything.
That's true. Well, stop everything. They can't force us to do anything. They could stop everything with Fort Kent. The solution is for them to go to Madawaska and say, they don't want to do it, let's us do it. Piece of cake. Go ahead. Fort Kent shouldn't be dragged into it.
But can't they do that anyway?
Yeah, I think.
They can do it anyway, right? Because we can, even if we have 51% and we can, like you were saying, strong arm them, they can still say, no, we don't want to, and back out, right? Am I right in that?
Well, that's a big, backing out is a whole different story. You can strong arm them right now.
No, but as far as anything major that comes up, I thought that was one of the things that, maybe I'm totally off on this, but that at any point, any one of the three schools doesn't have to continue in a particular direction. Or is that not true?
Currently today, it's not true.
It's not true.
But currently today, you don't have 51% to vote either.
Okay.
So I think it's a package deal.
Gary, coming back to your thing, if the way this is written, if we're at 50, 34, or whatever your numbers were, and they had 12, if it's 5/6 vote needed at 12%, they would still need a 5/6, they still need 5/6, so it's like those supermajorities aren't weighted, those are 5/6. So 1/6% vote.
We originally talked about doing away with the fraction and going with a percentage.
My brain's hurting.
But I mean, like a percentage for approval. I think we talked about that at
Well,
one
I
time.
think the whole deal with the 7/9 and eventually the 5/6 was, we want at least near unanimity. You say that right, but
We wanted a way to ensure that at least one member from each SAU approved what was going to pass.
But I can see why that would be a kind of a crazy thing, because they should be board.
Right. And I think,
so we got two separate.
unless you have a rogue board member, I don't know who
Right.
would go against their board.
Well, it happened,
Once you have a split board vote,
it happened in the site select.
Well, in all fairness, it didn't happen in site selection, it was unanimous, and then somebody flipped their vote after the meeting because they had a change of heart. But when everyone raised their hand for site selection, it was consensus, and it changed shortly after.
Well, I guess the point though is that the division under representation can control the outcome for all of them. It's just, it's not a good time. I share your concern. Your concern is, we got a weighted vote, we don't want to give that up. And my response to you would be, we have better than a weighted vote, we have an absolute veto. We don't want to give that up. Whereas, we could lose the weighted vote tomorrow. Lucy says it's 50.7 right now. It's 50-50. I don't know why you would round down to 50%. I don't see why logically you would round up to 51%. Or better yet, simply call it what it is, 50.7. Right?
so we're doing it your way on this day. What do we do if the board split? If we're, this side of the table wants this, that side wants that.
You're referring to the MSAD27 board, not being in agreement.
Well, like going,
How our representatives
if
are
we
going to
just go and
represent
it's one vote for each district.
I think
If
it's
the board is
majority
split,
rule.
Well, if we're kind of a little bit of a divisive place right now, we'd ultimately have to do the vote. And that would bound our members to go to the Valley Unified Board and vote second.
By majority vote,
Right.
by MSAD.
But assuming we're split.
Now,
Abby's not here. Vote
oh, 3-3? I don't know, what's the rule about that?
Dead.
3-3,
Motion
take no
is
action?
A tied motion, dead.
It's dead. You defeat.
So then what do we do when we get to the meeting? Abstain?
No, the issue has to be resolved, maybe. I mean, I don't see how you can't resolve it, right? So.
I think we're getting into a lot of what if scenarios, and this is we're having a very good discussion. I don't think we could have had this discussion at a regular board meeting, like we weren't doing a disservice to everything else on the agenda. So I think what we need to do is go back and look at Dave's original motion, which was, could you read that again, Lucy?
To modify the proposed agreement so that the areas where a 7/9 vote from members of the 3 districts, we would instead require the approval of each board. The board would have to take action, not the members of the board of the DUESC. Affirmative vote from all 3 boards would be required.
So on the contentious issues that currently require a 7/9 vote, we would, this is what we're proposing for the ILA language. Now the policy situation, that's something separate. As far as how our members are to go there and vote, that's something separate.
I just don't understand how we define what is contentious or
Well,
significant.
what's currently required,
The ones that I read.
The ones that you read.
the ones that require 7/9.
So those require 7/9. What would require this, where would this percentage apply then?
Just for
Or just-
regular votes.
Just right, okay, so,
Approval of minutes, approval of financial statements, approving a new policy.
So
The
basically,
weighted vote doesn't even count for any of these,
just a regular
the
day-to-day issue.
significant votes. The weighted vote doesn't matter?
It still matters because 5/6, you're still getting the weight out of 5/6. It's just not specifically
Right.
25%, 25%. You know what I mean? Because one member, out of 6 members, one member can vote against what the other 5 do, and it passes. That still falls within the weight limits for the most part. Except for SB27, because we have so much weight to that. Well, I put it this way, even if one so let's say we go to a meeting and one SAD27 board member votes no, 75% of the vote is still saying yes.
Right. Okay.
And I don't think I think if we address in policy how our members our representatives are supposed to vote on that board, I think we can go back to this, the red lines here, and say you were good at this, 5/6 vote. Because we know in policy, we've directed our representatives go there and vote based on the board's wishes. We don't care about MSAD 33, however, if they want to go there and their members split vote, that's on them. Madawaska, if their 2 persons going to that board are split, that's on them, that's their problem. They can address it. So, your motion, in essence, really, it's looking to fix an issue across the whole Valley Unified, whereas I think a simple policy change on our end may avoid that, and our partners are already looking at the red highlighted parts on this agreement, and from our previous discussions, they were okay with the changes we presented here for the most part. Dave?
There wasn't a discussion to speak of at the last meeting. And that group is being reconstituted now, elections and so forth, so it's a different group. I think there was a lot of good feeling generally, but nobody was committed, from what I could see. You had some new people there who just remained silent the entire time, taking it in. But I will say this, and something I said earlier. If it's fair for us, we ought to be concerned about fairness to our partners as well. And frankly, I mean, from their perspective, this is a good deal. I think, frankly, from their perspective, it's an essential thing. It is for us too, although maybe, like you say, we could have policy nullify the vote. The committee member didn't have back to the board, but This is an agreement that applies to all three. When you're working in cooperation with others, be it a contract or a cooperative effort of any kind, it's built on goodwill. One of the reasons the Frenchville, in my opinion, one of the reasons the Frenchville thing didn't go forward is because there was a lack of goodwill, a lack of good faith by all three entities. They weren't talking turkey to each other. They all said one thing publicly, and in the back room and said, yeah, but, we got this covered. You can't build a cooperative relationship in that kind of relationship. The foundation has to be solid, it's got to be honest, it's got to be straightforward. You have to build on that. I think an equitable document that treats all three members fairly and doesn't compromise any of the three members, most importantly ours, of course, but any of the three members' right of self-determination, local control, but expects all three members to work together when it's to their advantage, which I think we will. Because it just makes sense. Not because we want to get along, but because it just makes sense. I think we can count on that. I think we can build on that. That's the kind of relationship between the parties that we want to have.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I think after hearing more and more of this, that we have that already here. It only takes, even though Wisdom only has a 16% in the weighted vote, because of the 5/6 on all of the significant votes, they can still, veto or hold something up if they need to. We can still do that. They can still, anybody can still do that. I don't see how it's unfair. I had misunderstood in the beginning the 50% of the 5/6 and all of that. I thought it was the 5/6 would have turned into a percentage. But hearing that it's 5 out of 6, is that what I'm understanding? It is 5 out of the 6 people, not necessarily a fraction.
Because you don't want.
It's not a percentage.
You don't want SAD 33 to be strong-armed by
Right.
their low percentage on such a big vote.
So, given that, it's up to them to decide that they need to vote together if it's not good for their district. And for us to make a policy that says that our representation will vote as this board dictates.
I mean, share as superintendent, I'm guessing that you're having these same conversations with them as far as, well, I am 100% on the board on collaboration and working together, and I think that you could probably get more done with requiring basically a unanimous vote as opposed to a 5/6 vote. I think you actually probably could get more done that way. But having lived through what we lived through, it really feels weird to not do this. So now I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you think of, in a lawyerly, worst-case scenario kind of way, a situation in which we'd be jammed into a box that we don't want to be in with this as opposed to what you're saying?
Yeah, it's easy. It already happened. You're choosing something critical like site selection. Madawaska says 3 votes, yes. Frenchville says 3 votes, yes. Fort Kent says 2 votes no, 1 vote yes. What happens? Site selection choice is made. Fort Kent effectively lost its control of the issue.
But if we have this
There's that
policy,
scenario.
but if we have this policy.
That wasn't decided by the Valley Unified Board, that was decided by the site
Right,
selection
right.
committee.
Regardless, it's an example of how that works.
But if we have this policy in place, in addition to this,
Well, the whole program assumes that you can have conflict within a board. And somehow that conflict will be resolved by the members splitting. That whole concept to me doesn't make sense. It's the board that should be taking this important action. Frenchville's board, Madawaska's board, and SAD 27. So if you create a situation where you will tolerate, and even in some ways welcome, a split on a board, you're building on a fraction. Just,
So Dave, if I'm understanding you fully, the intent of your motion was to set anything that currently requires a 7/9 vote at the Valley Unified Board level to be sent back to the individual boards for ultimate approval.
right, to the board speech, and not the members. So when you come back and you have a vote, to the extent that there's a vote at all, your representatives, the two representatives from each district, would say, we vote this way because this is what our board decided.
Which would prevent any voting on something that, at a meeting that hasn't had a chance to discuss. I mean, hopefully.
Right, it gives you a chance to bounce it back to the board, and there's probably a month or 6 weeks in between where the issue can be fermented and think about it.
I think Lucy has something that she'd like to add.
I just have a question for you, Keith, just to think about.
Huh?
So if you create a policy at the SAD 27 board level that says you must vote accordingly, if you don't have a similar policy on the BUESC board, what happens if the board, the two members don't vote according to SAD 27? Does it hold any weight?
We're just talking about strictly an SAD 27.
Yeah, but
policy, which
I'm saying, okay, that board member went and voted, the two board members went and voted different ways
I see what you're saying.
against the policy in SAD 27. So what? At the BUESC level, the vote has been made. SAD 27 policy doesn't control the UESC. So unless you have equivalent policies in both unions.
How about we just all look at each other and say, whatever we decide, let's make sure we do it that way. Valley Unified.
Yeah.
My only fear is that if we go back to the Valley Unified Board partners with a totally revamped copy of this, where you guys are winners in where we're at right now, I'm just fearful that it's going to set up red flags with your partners that what's behind this. And I know there's nothing behind it. I like Dave's logic. I think it makes sense. And in a perfect world, I wish everyone would agree on things that make sense to agree. But we're not in a perfect world. So that's my only concern.
I'm just not seeing, I understand, but I'm not seeing much of a difference, because really the weighted votes hold no weight in the votes that would really matter. And in the votes that would really matter, 5/6, 6/6, one unit, one entity can still hold everyone else hostage. Either way, if it's 5/6 or 6/6, we all, as 1, 2, 3 school units, have to agree in order for the 5/6 to pass. So,
The concern is if you have a board member that
right,
changes their mind individually.
right. But then both board members would have to change their mind individually in order for it to pass or not pass, correct?
Or one
And-
person from that lost and one person from here.
Right.
Yeah.
And that could all be a discussion at the Valley Unified.
It's going to have to be.
Or what if you change it to 6? I mean,
I don't
Abby,
Yeah.
sorry. If you have, say the board here votes that the two members are going to go and they're required to vote no.
Right.
So 2 yes, 1 votes yes, it passes.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right?
Right.
Where the board's intention was to vote no and have it not pass.
So whether or not we do 5/6 or 6/6 in this, and without changing the entire policy, could we add something in here that, I'm sure Madawaska and 33 would be agreeable with us and say we have that same concern, because it could go that way for them in the same respect. So could we not discuss our concern of that with them? They might agree, and we could add something to this that is to the effect of those two members must vote what the majority of their respective boards have.
I mean, it feels like we're running around, we're chasing our tails right now,
Yeah.
running around in
I
circles.
have another
But
question.
what I feel like is, we need to take a vote on Dave's motion first of all. And I think it's a great motion. And I think it's something that could be discussed if this board wants it to be discussed and votes to approve Dave's motion. We can discuss it at the next Value Unified meeting. Or we can vote down the motion and go with what our attorneys have already reviewed in these, as far as these changes are concerned. He didn't see any red flags. It wasn't Dan, right?
It was Peter Law.
Peter.
So I think you should have that discussion at the Value Unified level regardless of what anybody votes on Dave's motion. The only difference is that with Dave's motion, you're taking a revised document to the table at Value Unified. That's the only difference. But I think the conversation should happen.
Well, the other part is, we're taking a revised document to the table for negotiation. Now, they might say, I'm saying, okay? And if they say that, well, we have to go back to the drawing board. Right? But what I'm trying to get in my motion is some indication from my own board about whether you think this makes sense, because I'd like to advance the proposition. To argue that to them. I think it should be an easy sell for them, frankly. I understand they might, as you suggest, Ben, they might be suspicious. Gee, why are you guys changing this? But I think we're open to lay it out. There's a chance that it will succeed. It may not succeed. If it doesn't, I think that's okay too. But I just figured, before I go to, the reason I wanted to huddle with my committee, Gary was, because, well, at the Summers meeting, I was the only one at that meeting, and I advanced a unanimous proposal. Spitballing, here, what do you think about this, folks? Okay, but I did have my board meeting, and I didn't feel particularly comfortable about that. And so I think the right way for us to do it is for us to huddle, and the better way is, if you suggested, Keith, well, no, let's huddle as a board. It's a lot to swallow. This is not a simple thing. And how it operates in practice is sometimes hard to think through until you've seen it operate.
And they may have something else to present to us that we haven't even considered whatsoever in these modifications.
Right.
So there's bound to be some back and forth here.
Oh, yeah.
We're probably not going to go to the meeting and say, yes, you know what, sign, seal, delivered, we're done. So. Gary, you got something else?
Just real quickly, that I think we accomplished the same thing we put it on policy level on MSAD27. I know people saying, well, there's nothing to say that you can't go and vote opposite. There's nothing to say I can't go vote opposite on this. So you and I, if the two reps, we don't make it, I go, I can vote however the heck I want. There's no repercussion. Like Ben said, we got to look at each other and say, look, we're a board, we're doing this.
Yeah. And I think
It's as simple as that. We're making.
And I think after, we did have a couple times where there was a split vote or whatever. And I think after that, we had a more focused effort on making sure we had, as representatives, a clear understanding from the full board. We never took a binding vote, but we were sent with the board's intent.
And that's awesome, until we have COVID or another school issue like the value fund. Because then, like, Gary and I are gonna go in there, and if I'm not dictated by this board to say a certain thing, if he's not dictated by the board to expect certain thing, he and I are probably voting different on masks. And it would be, yeah, we are. And it would be, I would be going against my conscience at that point, and if I'm not dictated by some policy to vote, no, we're gonna, then I'm gonna vote with my conscience at that point. If there's a policy in place that says you have to vote the board, well, then there you go, then I have to.
So if we
And
go
it's
with
not
Dave,
about my
so if we go with Dave's motion, in essence, the SAD27 board has casted the two votes here before the representatives have even attended that meeting.
Right.
And you're attending that meeting, really, well, you're there.
The way to address it is, you simply say those issues must be voted upon by the board and not by So to address your problem, Gary, you're right. So the way the draft changed is to say, on those critical issues, the vote is not by the representatives of the board. The vote is by the board. Each board votes. And that's transmitted by the representatives, but it's not a representative vote. It's the board vote. So you avoid several steps.
So at that point, why have representatives?
Well, because you can't send the whole board to the meeting.
Fair point.
I think the other thing to consider is we're talking about a document that's going to live past when many of us might be on this board. For whatever that's worth. This isn't just how we're going to behave in the next 2 years, but likely how other people might behave in the coming years.
Shannon, no more pandemics. And no more regional schools.
Knocking on wood. All of it.
That language is gone. Very good. Well, I'm gonna ask you, Lucy, one more time. Because we've had so much discussion for the general public to clearly understand what we're voting on. Mr. Soucy's motion.
So motion to modify the proposed agreement so that the areas where a 7-9 vote from members of the 3 districts would instead require the approval of each board. The board would have to take action, not the members of the board of the BUESC. A formative vote of all 3 boards would be required.
I'm gonna do something different. We're gonna do a roll call vote. Gary, how do you vote? This was in.
I'm gonna say nay.
Mrs. Ashley?
Can I say more than one word? I'm going to say nay, but then I would like it to be a discussion there, to have more discussion on it.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Mr. Soucy? Yes. Ms. Larkin? No. Ms. Kohler?
I'm going to say yes.
I think, I understand Dave's intent. Absolutely want everybody to be happy and.
No, I anticipate that people are going to be unhappy. What I want to be sure of is that we have a good way to work through our unhappiness and that we can stick together.
I think we're gonna have discussions. I'd like a 6-6 vote, but I'm not for it at this time. I think we're gonna stick to a 5-6 vote. And we're gonna have those discussions with our partners at the Valley Unified meeting. We're gonna look at what Sarah was suggesting, some other ideas. We talked about policy, however else, but that motion fails.
Now, I should ask the board, I'm a member of the committee, and I would like to go to Madawaska and Frenchville and make the same argument to them that I made to you. Anybody offended by that? Anybody want to argue that I shouldn't do that?
I don't really think you should, Dave. I mean, if we're not supporting it, then that's the one vote that shoots it down.
But I have to tell you, we're 3 on the committee, and we can split. And that's what you're in
We have a
favor of.
policy that says you don't,
We don't have such a policy.
Yes.
but that's the whole idea behind it.
Well, and to Ben, follow up on Ben's statement earlier, Dave, I feel like if we make the changes to these, the other boards are seeing the same changes as we are, right?
Yours has the yellow comments from your order, theirs does not. Theirs has their own comments from their orders.
But the way the voting part, the terminology change, removal of the regional school, the 5-6 vote, that's all in their packets.
Okay.
If we go in there, I think with anything else, I'm afraid they're gonna start wondering why, and then we get into this hole, they're gonna go back and forth. And there are people in their communities who we've had to deal with in the past, and they're gonna wonder, what's up? Why is MSAD 27 doing this? There's gonna be an ulterior motive. I just know that's what's gonna happen. And I don't have a crystal ball here, but that's what I feel. I don't know, but I feel that's what's gonna happen. And I think if we go there with what's been presented, and they bring up some other sort of discussion on their own, Dave, to us, you know, maybe we can bring their recommendations or their suggestions back to our board and say, hey, well, guess what? They watched us on the meeting tonight, and they thought it was a great idea, now we're gonna bring it back to our board.
I think in my mind, I didn't feel any particular way about 5/6 or 6/6, because in my mind, it's basically the same thing. The only reason I said yes was for the example that Lucy gave, because I guess that's something to avoid. To me, the thing that would matter is some sort of policy, whether at MSAD27 level or at DEC level, that states that our members, you know, should have some sort of consensus when going. I think that's what matters more to me. And sure, we would hope that, you know, we all respect each other and we would all go, our numbers that we decided to send there, we do it, but that's not always the case. So that's what mattered to me, I guess.
Is there anything else within the interlocal agreement that you feel like didn't get discussed or didn't get properly addressed by our attorney?
I have a question. Of the services, shared administrative personnel may include. Now, are those all, like if Valley Unified says these are the services that we're offering, everybody has to take them, or is it a la carte?
Whatever you agree upon is what is agreed upon. So it's not really a la carte. Like one entity can't
Say, we don't want this.
we don't want this, we don't want the executive director. We only want the curriculum coordinator. It's a package. But this just lists possible, so it's not all of these. So like transportation director is listed here, we don't agree on a transportation director. That's not part of our shared services.
And if that was to be added, that would be a 5/6.
It would have to be approved at the 5/6. Well, it would have to be approved at this level first, and then you would send your board members to go approve it at that level. But yes, 5/6. 7/9 current.
7/9.
In other words, you've lost the whole. Practical.
Well, we would vote at this board first, before volunteering our services. Say if we wanted to share Anne Marie, for instance, with the other two school entities. Anne Marie is currently an employee of MSAD27. That won't change unless we vote to allow it to change and share her salary and benefits amongst the other school units, and we get to share her services and so on and so forth. That's not,
They can't come to us and say, oh, we're gonna now.
just take her, no.
There's another comment I'd like to make. Mentioned several times, both Ben, this has been reviewed by our attorney, but it has not. Or if it has been, it has not been reviewed in compensation. So there hasn't been any kind of dialogue with the attorney with respect to anything. We hope that there might be, but he unfortunately had a family event in the United Kingdom at the fly away. I don't know if he's back yet. It has not, it's made it impossible for us to have a discussion about these issues. So I don't think you should feel as if this has been thoroughly reviewed by an attorney who knows what the proposal is, understands how it's operates, and has given advice with respect to that.
We had a little bit of discussion about that. If Gary, you weren't here, and I think Shannon, you weren't here for the last meeting either, so. We had some discussion about our superintendent Ben directly coordinating with our attorney regarding Valley Unified and how that can be perceived as a conflict of interest just because of his position. It's obviously he's an executive director, superintendent for all three school districts, so just the perception. It wasn't meant as a slight toward Ben.
As lawyers look at this, it's a clear conflict. It's not a perceived conflict. It's in fact, in addition to a perceived conflict, a clear conflict. This is not a situation where, oh, we don't want to look at that. there's clearly a problem. It sticks out, red flag goes up. So it's worth paying attention to that. You've been here before with that.
To be fair, I did the same thing with all of the attorneys, the same way, sent them the same document, said, looking for your feedback, received feedback from all three, and provided it back to the board. I didn't treat you guys any differently than I treated that once.
What are you,
Are you suggesting that, I'm sorry?
yeah, what are you wanting to happen instead of what has happened?
What has to happen is our attorney needs to speak with the board. So our board should have a chance, and this committee, it'd be the committee actually, would have a chance to tell the lawyer, these are the issues, this is what we're thinking of doing, what do you think? And the lawyer will give you feedback and some understanding of what the options might be to prepare you to do whatever you choose. Then, doing that, on behalf of the board, I'm not suggesting it wasn't well-intentioned, and it's not personal. It's not intended to be personal. But he can't do that. He represents Valley United. He also represents Madawaska. It's kind of like asking your negotiating opponent to talk to your lawyer and work out the kinks.
Just to be clear, you mean Ben Georgia from Madawaska, not our attorney.
Right? Right. So, I mean, the point is, it's clear conflict from an attorney standpoint. I don't know how it happened. I look at this and say, how did we get here? But what compounds the problem in my mind is this apparently happened the last time. After year it happened. So
The issue last time was we had a common attorney representing all three, and that was the snafu.
right, it was a very similar.
And they're the ones that aided in the drafting of the original ILA.
Which was a conflict, having the same attorney for all.
Well, Dave, I think going forward, what would be your suggestion? If we have a contentious issue, we could appoint one of the three of us, well, we'll go down to a two-member board, we could have two of the Valley Unified reps on our board, talk to the attorney themselves, and bring their findings back to the full board. Is that what you're
Yeah,
suggesting?
or the attorney could talk to the full board.
We've done that in the past.
Right. I mean, that's the way I would have handled it if I was the attorney. But, and I guess I don't understand exactly what you understand.
We've done that in the past.
Yeah.
I think this, I know a lot of you haven't been here for a while, but, you know, we've seen the reasons why we had to meet as a board with our attorney, minus Ben. Wasn't always a comfortable situation for Ben or us, but we had to do it because we just had to discuss things at a board level with our council that we didn't want other parties involved to understand our approach or our reasons. I think we've removed a lot of those issues from the table by getting that regional school right out of the IOA. So, I'd have no problem with discussing issues with the attorney going forward. If we think the board chair should be the one to do that regarding Valley Unified.
Yeah.
Or we can have Dave discuss that with the attorney, that's no problem.
I think one of the things that contributed to, I think, some of the issues after the board of consulting was the, like, all of that falling apart, was that there was times that we didn't necessarily want other people involved, but we also weren't very clear with our superintendent what we wanted. And I think, like, there's probably a fine line somewhere between, like, we have to instruct him, okay, don't act counter to this, but he can't do his job for us if we don't tell him what we want him to do. And I think that was an issue. So I think this answer is somewhere in there between yes, we absolutely have to be involved in the conversation.
See, to be fair to Ben here, he owes us a duty to work for our best interest. He also owes Madawaska that duty. And so if we say, Ben, this is a secret, this is what we'd like to do, Madawaska might not want to do this, but we'd like to try to make it happen. How can he listen to that secret and be fair to Madawaska and not say, oh, look what I heard? But how can he tell Madawaska, oh, look what I heard, and still be fair to us? It's an impossible position. You just don't go there.
And to be fair, I mean, that regional school was something I desired very much. So, and I'm gonna be perfectly honest, so when, things started to fall apart, it was good that you excluded me from those conversations because my heart was in collaboration and all of that. I don't want to revisit that. I think you'll get some feedback from the other two groups on the ILA. I think you'll have something to take back to your attorney on some form of this is what was brought to the table, and then you can consult with him on what your thoughts are.
One other thing before we move on to the next agenda item. Underneath the shared services, Ben, I think I can't remember who brought this up, but there's mention here of shared central office services and possibly exploring that further as far as centralizing central office services, if that makes any sense. And the potential to have to add an admin assistant position at that level. To be perfectly clear, we would, as a board, have to approve that, as would the other boards, correct?
Trying to remember when this was drafted. This is where we were trying to pull central office together. Since then, it's three separate central offices, and aside from collaborating, the only shared people are Giselle, myself, and Lucy.
Okay. But the only reason I bring this up is I was wondering is it because our partners are interested in exploring those options? Is that why this has come up, or is this just something left over from a previous update?
We do have a situation in Madawaska where they're short of a bookkeeper and payroll specialist. So we've thought about, can we extend services here in 27 to help with that? But the more we've explored that, it's just impossible. It would take away too much from the work that the girls are doing here. So until we would bring something to you for consideration, we're going to stay separate. Okay. Is that correct, Lisa?
And I guess that wasn't the last thing. Well, I mean, we're looking at this ILA, and then we've got the positions of the last 2 pages, 2 or 3 pages after the signature page. The pages after the signature page, are they actually considered part of the ILA?
The
Shared services?
we were proposing to add this as an appendix. This is a proposal because this does not exist in the ILA, and we're proposing in this revision that we add it as appendix 1, so that we always have a list of our shared services.
What we have as options for shared services?
What
We
we
don't
current-
actually have a shared central
No,
office.
and this would just need to be revised.
Oh, okay.
We do have shared central office services, but it's with respect to HR, which is Lucy, myself, and
Okay.
Giselle.
Okay, you answered some questions.
So before we move on, where do we stand on our superintendent communicating with our attorney? Did we reach a point?
We didn't take a vote on it. We just came to I think a mutual agreement that, and maybe we should be voted on. But I think Ben has understood he's going to remove himself from that situation in order to avoid it.
I will either include the board or I will defer to the board for any communication with your attorney involving value.
I would think that the two of you work together on it. I mean, I don't have a problem with our superintendent, he is our superintendent, in communicating with our attorneys. As long as they work together on it. I mean, do you see an issue with that, Dave?
It's huge. I do. Because he's Madawaska's. It's not personal, right? But I don't see how we can, if there are any contentious issues at all.
On contentious issues, we may want to look at it differently.
But those are the only ones we're going to talk to the attorney about. And frankly, you put him in an impossible place. He's going to be fair to Anahuasca and fair to us.
Several
But-
years now.
But just, let's just separate one thing. There's SAD27's representation regarding these matters. And then there's Valley Unified. Valley Unified has its own attorney, right, which is a little bit on the woods. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Let's keep track of, yes. So, I think in all fairness, what do you suggest, Ben? I think you ought to be removed from it just because of the position that you're put in, having to wear 4 different hats.
I don't know that there's anything left as contentious as, do you want a regional school in Frenchville left on the table? IOA's language, generally, what the communities of SAD27 want are generally what the communities of Madawaska and Region 3 want. Everybody wants good schools, everybody wants lower taxes, everybody wants the same general things. In the event, though, that something that tears at my heartstring, like a regional school, prohibits me from acting in good faith to you in 27, I would definitely defer to not be part of that, but I don't know that that's here nor there. I'm very fine about representing you when I'm with you and representing Madawaska when I'm with them. I would never tell you what their lawyers are telling them. I would never tell them what your lawyers are telling you. That's not for me to decide. That's for you guys to bring to the table and negotiate. I just find myself the person who's connecting everyone together and getting the pieces in place. I'm not talking with your lawyer and saying, I think you should suggest this, or that's not my role. So if it comes to where you want to have that engagement with your attorney based on, I think it's appropriate to have a member or 2 or 3 or the full board as part of that. I would never speak on your behalf, not knowing what you collectively want.
Well, I think going forward, if there's ever going to be an opportunity where we need to, or an issue arises where we need to talk to an attorney, it's going to be something very important, very divisive. It's probably something that the full board would have to just, you know what, we're going to go into executive session, we're going to bring our attorney in via Zoom, and it's going to be open for the whole board to see and to ask questions as needed. We've done it in the past, so I can see why we can't take that approach going forward.
What I will not do is speak with your attorney on Valley Unified matters without at least bringing things to your attention and inviting you into the discussions for the time being, unless you want to take another course of action.
I think that, that alleviates my concerns, maybe I know Dave's still got his lawyer hat over there, he's thinking about, what he brought up before.
I'm not the only guy with the lawyer hat. Another lawyer has a lawyer hat too. He and I should have a shared understanding that we haven't discussed. But what happened here should not have happened. I think it is a very serious matter. Not because it has practical consequences, but because of professional responsibility.
Is there potential that he just doesn't really understand our situation here and our relationship with our neighbors?
I think so. I certainly wouldn't impute to him, a man I don't even know, bad motives or anything like that. I'm quite certain that's not the case. Sometimes practices evolve over time that maybe are on the edge or think profession should be more alert to. You find yourself in a place where when you get reminded of the fact, you say, you know what, I think you shouldn't have been one. Right? And I suspect this is a situation.
And he wasn't the original attorney from that firm that handled a lot of what you guys are doing, but because of the other attorney's non-responsiveness, you and I had spoken that I was going to consult with another one who was a little more responsive.
Do we have more of a clear understanding of the expectations than as far as your communications?
Yeah, I
if there's going to be communications, I think I need to be included in that. I don't foresee any unless something happens at the Valley Unified meeting that we just have to say, well, we need to talk to legal counsel about this, I don't see us really having to reach back out to Peter, but if we do, it may warrant him zooming in and us going into executive session. And at that time, if we see fit that maybe Ben should remove himself from the room at that time, we can ask Ben to do it at that time. You have to come back. So I think that maybe partially, somewhat alleviates your concern.
Frankly, I've had correspondence with the lawyer, very brief, which set out clear lines of understanding. He and I are in agreement on that. We just have to pursue it further. I think it was important to state the concern. I think it was important for him to address that. That's been done. That's between him and me. Ben is weighing in as well. So I'm satisfied with that.
You reached out to him on a personal level or representing our board?
I reached out to him. I wrote I don't recall exactly what initiated the email correspondence, but there were 2 or 3 back and forth, where I basically said, what's going on here? How can it be that you're advising Ben about this issue?
Right, I guess my question was simply, were you representing yourself or were you representing this board without any of us having any knowledge or asking you to do that? And I don't mean to...
It's a technical issue, right?
Well, it is a technical issue.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, because then what's to
Because
stop everybody on the board just from going back and forth with the issue?
I don't have a problem with Ben talking to our lawyer, and we put him in this position at this point, and I fully trust that he's going to reach out to whoever he needs to reach out to from here on forward, if there's an issue that comes up, and make sure everybody's on board. And like you said, at this point, you're going to be included on any of the issues. But I do want to say publicly, and to you and to anyone else, that if you're going to reach out on behalf of the board, then I think that the board should know. And so that's what I was just questioning.
2 answers. I was reaching out to a member of the committee, and as a member of the committee, I have authority to talk to people and gather information
That's fine.
to later present to Valley United various options that we can consider as a board and that they can consider. So I don't think I was stepping outside my box of authority. More fundamentally, what I discussed with him was not a matter of substance having to do with the actual negotiations. It was entirely a matter of professional responsibility. In that regard, I spoke to him as a lawyer speaks to a lawyer.
Thank you.
Wrestling team?
Very good. All right, moving on, new business. Item A, cooperative wrestling team approval.
Real simple, SAD 33 Wisdom has, I believe, 3 or 4, they might be up to 5 now, wrestlers interested in wrestling. Last year, there were 2 wrestlers that wrestled with our team as individuals, so they did not count towards our team scores. They were independent wrestlers for Wisdom, and so they didn't count towards that. Our numbers are a little bit down this year. Wisdom is looking to, well, collaboratively, we're looking to add the 3 or 4 Wisdom wrestlers to the Fort Kent team. In addition, Madawaska looks like they have 2 or 3 wrestlers that would like to participate as well in a cooperative wrestling team. In order for a cooperative wrestling team to happen, it would need board approval. So from all 3 boards. SAD 33 has approved it at their level. I'm asking you all if you would like to approve it. What it means is those wrestlers all together would form one team. They would be wrestling for Fort Kent Warriors, but it would call it Fort Kent Madawaska Wisdom team collaboratively on those. More teams have been doing this when they don't have programs, and I think it would be nice to extend our wrestling team coaches and experience to those schools. For a matter of finances, what we would do is assess both those school districts a portion of whatever the costs are for the overall program, so that would include your busing and your coaching and all that, based on whatever percentage of kids are sending to us.
Then are we talking about high school and middle school?
I believe this is just for high school.
I make a motion, we form a cooperative wrestling team.
And that was
Jim?
Motion made by Gary, seconded by Shannon. Discussion?
There are only two schools in Roussel County that have wrestling. So it's wonderful that we can offer this, because a lot of kids are turned on by it big time.
I guess my question is Madawaska and 33 not have enough students that would potentially be interested in forming their own team, just because of the simple fact, 4 can just like Garrett would play?
Right, and they still wouldn't, you have so many gaps in all the weight classes that you're essentially giving so many forfeits that it's, now with this cooperative team, you will essentially be able to fill in on almost all the weight classes.
And then where Warrior, really?
Yeah. But we're the team that it has established, so similar to Van Buren, played soccer with Wisdom this year, the collaborative team, they were Wisdom Pioneer outfits.
as far as practices, would we do the same thing as we did the Aquan football, where we have to find out there?
Practices are here, and it's up to those schools to get their athletes in, and they're going to differ from parents.
My concern about this is I don't want to hear about a student, SAD 27 student, not getting a chance to wrestle because he's been displaced by another school district student. Because obviously our SAD 27 students should be getting priority, I would think. But that also depends on their skill and ability.
We made sure that we asked Coach Scott Dubois what his preference would be, and he felt that this would form a full team, having all these kids together.
Great. Answer my question. Very good. All in favor of forming the cooperative wrestling team? Very good. Motion's unanimous. Team approved. All right, I guess that's all we have on our agenda. Next regular meeting date is December 5, 2022 at 6 p.m. here at CHS.
Yep.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Sarah, seconded by Shannon. All in favor?